I'm Elizabeth Laskar, and I'm the lead for the Oxford Human Rights Festival at CENDEP, which is the Centre of Development and Emergency Practice at Brookes University. The festival's aim is to raise awareness of human rights issues through the arts, which include film, performance, talks, workshops, discussion, and exhibitions. Founded in 2003, the festival was initiated by postgraduates and staff at the Centre of Development and Emergency Practice at Brookes University in Oxford. We also encourage collaborations with the community worldwide and for organisations to walk alongside us. Before we begin our event today, we've got a few bits of housekeeping that we need to go through. All our participants, those who have joined us today, you've all been put on mute. And our community space today is going to be our chat box, where you will be able to reflect and share your thoughts. We ask you to be respectful in that space with your interactions in the chat box. We are also recording this event, so those of you who didn't make it today are able to watch it across our social media site. Please turn off your camera if you do not want to be recorded. We'll only be publishing in speaker view. So when we do put it online, it will just be the main speakers that speak today. Later on today, you're going to be invited to join a breakout room, and there'll be small discussion groups. If you don't want to join that group, please just don't press the button, and it means that you'll stay in the main breakout room. And breakout rooms won't be recorded. If you have any tech issues, we'll allow you back into the space, and tech generally over isn't that good. So if you do have if we have some technicalities, please bear with us. We'll try and sort things out. You'll see behind me, I've got a banner. The theme of this year's festival is disruption. And more recently, we've all experienced disruption, particularly with the pandemic. It was this time last year that the festival was cancelled and we went into lockdown in the UK. This year's festival is very special in that we've been able to take it online for the first time in its 19 years. And it's got a silver lining. It means that we've been able to connect with organizations like Creators of Peace and take events like this to a global audience. So the festival today is a space for discussion, a space for new ideas, a space for sharing experiences, and a space for coming together. So as we begin, I now invite Amina Dikedi. From 1994 to 2013, Amina served as an international coordinator of Creators of Peace. She has been a board member of Initiatives of Change Nigeria since 2012 and is currently the president of Creators of Peace International. So I invite Amina to share a few words about Creators of Peace.
Okay, thank you very much, Elizabeth, and welcome to everybody. I want to start by thanking the Oxford Human Rights for providing the platform for this session hosted by Creators of Peace. And just a bit of a background to Creators of Peace. We are a global network of more than 5,000 women active in 40 countries, though connected to over 50. We work on the ground in our communities to create global peace at a grassroots level. Our approach is human-centered and starts with the individual. We have found that if we can create peace at this level, we can create peace at every other level, at the community, political, national, and global. Creators of Peace is part of Initiatives of Change, which is a global organization dedicated to building trust across the world's divides. Since inception in 1991, Creators of Peace have developed and refined a range of tools, initiatives, and platforms which provide a safe and dynamic space for women to have difficult conversations, to challenge unhelpful thinking, and explore their relationship to peace. In our peace circles, which is a tool that we use, we hear and honor the stories of women from diverse backgrounds, sometimes with conflicting ideas, but along the way, through dialogues, they find a space to listen and find a meeting point. Beyond this level of interpersonal conversations, we are increasingly aware of the need in our world today to engage with challenging and sometimes uncomfortable conversations around race, economic disparities and injustices, environmental degradation, food and health security, and the list goes on. Peace is when all needs of people are being met. My hope is that the conversation guide advocating for a new story of our shared humanity that we are launching today will enable each one to find other ways of being rather than where we are in the world today. As you would hear later, the guide is for anyone and everyone, men and women. So as creators of peace, we see peace as both a personal and collective responsibility. Thank you. If you want more information on Creators of Peace, a link to our website will be put in the chat box, and you can go there to get more information. So thank you, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the session. I hand over to Elizabeth.
Thank you very much, Amina. So as Amina said, we'll be putting a chat in the chat box. We'll have a link where you can find out more about Creators of Peace. I'd like to now introduce Jean Brown and Anne Claire. Jean Brown is based in Australia and is one of the elders of Creators of Peace and has been involved with Creators of Peace since 1994. Jean is the designer of Creators of Peace circles, which has been spread to over 50 countries. She's worked full-time with initiatives for change for over 50 years, including for many years in India and the United States of America, pioneering projects such as Action for Life, a leadership program for young people, and supporting reconciliation initiatives in South Sudan. We also invite Anne Claire. She lives in Maryland, United States of America. She's the secretary of Creators of Peace International and has been involved with the creation of Advocates for a New Story since the first trial workshop in Co, Switzerland in 2017. Anne Claire is a freelance facilitator of participatory processes. Welcome, Jean and Anne Claire.
Thanks, Elle, very much. So greetings and gratitude to all who are here. The theme of this festival is disruption. And that's what we want to do, to disrupt the often unthinking and subconscious stories we live out of, the self-serving or divisive narratives that so often inform our worldviews and how we feel about ourselves and each other, those that shape our cultures. We're launching here a guide for group conversations on advocating for a new story of our shared humanity. Conversations for community and trust building. A shared humanity as in recognition of all of us as members of the same human race, and also shared humanity as in the practice of humanity or compassion. And this is just a guide, a prompt for the conversations that ultimately provide the substance of the process. And let me just read a paragraph from the introduction. Every person will have their own part in the realization of a truly shared humanity. There are huge obstacles to overcome. Current stories of prejudice, fear, blame, and greed, for example, along with historic hurts and discriminatory practices that go back over centuries. How we process our individual stories will either add or detract from this task. Addressing them, these are personal stories, alongside the huge challenges of planetary devastation and food shortages and people displacement, among other issues, requires a newfound appreciation of our togetherness and mutual value. So we hope that these conversations highlight where we're stuck, whether in nations or communities or in our own hearts. It is our foundational belief that change in people's hearts and attitudes is always possible. And with that awareness, perhaps we can uncover some tools that can help us get unstuck and find a way forward into this new story. Over the past few years, this need for the world to find a new narrative has really stirred me. A narrative that can move us from the story of separation to one of our shared humanity. But first, we have to identify and repair our own separation from whatever or whoever carries our blame or shame, even in our own families, from our preoccupation with the pursuit of self-interest at the expense of the other, and that is whoever falls outside of our personal zone of compassion. We can all be part of writing this new story of healing and wholeness. I have a great appreciation that we can launch this from the Oxford Festival of Human Rights. We're really grateful to them. We only start to get things right in the world when we address our human wrongs. And the content of this guide took shape from two workshops. The first with Amina, who you just heard speak, and the second in 2019 with Anne-Claire. So now, Anne-Claire, I'm going to ask you if you would just reflect, well, tell everybody how the guide works and your reflection on it. Thanks.
Thank you, Jean. Yes, so the conversation guide, how it is now, has 5 conversations. You could say 5 chapters, but each chapter is a conversation of about 2 hours, 2.5 hours, where it might be helpful if somebody hosts the conversation, but it doesn't need to be a heavy facilitator at all. It's really a group conversation. And every conversation will focus on an aspect of becoming aware of these stories. So it starts with becoming aware of the stories we live out of. What are the stories now around us in our lives, from our families and friends and the media? And it will go towards the stories we long for. What are the stories we really hope to have? But also the stories in us. What are the stories maybe that are stuck in us or that are stuck in our community? Like with the peace circles of creators of peace, also sharing our personal stories is an important aspect of this. It's sharing our story, and it's also about the listening to the other people's stories. And it will end with how to become an advocate for a new story, for a shared humanity. So like I said, the focus is really around the conversations. If you will pick up this guide, you will notice that while you read, the pieces of context and reflection that are in the guide, then there will be questions. And often the groups need very little to really get into full conversation, really want to share. You see the stories bubbling up, people becoming aware of, oh, these were the stories that were always around me. And so that the time will fly by. Still yesterday, I was hosting with a group in the Netherlands. I am Dutch and French, but I live in the US. So yesterday I was invited by Initiative of Change in the Netherlands to host a conversation. And it was beautiful again to see how people came back from the first conversation and realizing in conversation with friends or what they see around them, what are the stories? It's really realizing, oh, these are stories and not just the truth. And there might be this unrest coming up, you know, in this awareness. Okay, I want to change this. I have to change this. So I've seen this in different groups within my group in Americas and in the Netherlands. And in a group that I did with Jean, thanks to the pandemic, I was on Zoom able to join one of her first groups. So it's it needs little and people become aware. When I prepared with Jean the track in 2019, we were both looking at our own histories. And for me, that was the Dutch history. That used to be this history of the 17th century, where the Dutch conquered the seas and traded around the world and were heroes. And I have a history background, and I thought I have to go deeper into this and see the other side. So the other side is, a part of the other side is the colonies and the enslaved people, and Suriname plays a big role in that. And so I asked people around me, so we have a new story, we have this old story, what should the new story be? And then somebody told me, no, it's the dominant story that you're living out of. So you have to look for the other stories that are not part yet of the dominant. And how do we get all voices in the main story? So for me, that was a huge insight. And it was the night before the killing of George Floyd that we closed our group in Australia on Zoom last year. And I thought, yes, I want to continue with looking into this Dutch history, and I'm also in the US, but I'm still new here, just a couple of years. It's not my role. But after the killing of George Floyd and everything that happened, I realized, no, I'm as much a white person in the US as any other American. And it is also my place to here start changing the story. So I've started volunteer work to work on that. And I've realized it's also me. So it's, and every day still, I hear people talk about stories and sharing stories and changing stories. And every day in my life, I'm still discovering stories I've lived out of that I was not aware of. So it's a beautiful process, and it has been a great joy to work on this with Jean over these several years. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne-Claire. That's helpful to have your personal experience there. I'd like to invite everybody now to join the breakout rooms before we meet the other panelists who've all got lots of very interesting things to share. You'll be given a room to join and a couple of questions to consider, which are either going up on the screen or in the chat box. Now, please follow the breakout prompt. And if you need to return or have any challenges, you can come back to the tech team and they'll sort you out. Now, you'll be probably about 4 people in each, we hope, 4 people in each breakout room. Please take a couple of minutes to introduce yourselves before responding to the questions. There will be 20 minutes altogether, so you can make sure that each one has at least 4 minutes to share. That would be great. Thanks a lot. Tech team. The 2 questions. There are 2 questions which are, and the first one, number 1, what does a shared humanity mean, look like to you? And number 2, what personal experiences have you had that have affirmed or denied a shared humanity? Now do take some notes, especially from the first question, because we hope for some feedback later. So off we go.
Welcome back to everybody. Have we got everybody back? I think we've got everybody back. Yes, we do. I hope you enjoyed those sessions and meeting new people or meeting some people you already know. But I hope you had time to just take a few moments to share some reflections and enjoy the conversation. We've now got a few minutes to share your reflections. So we're going to be asking in the chat box, what does shared humanity mean to you? We're also going to be putting in a Mentimeter link in the chat box. Simply, if you click on the link, another box will open and you'll get a little box that pops up where you can enter in some reflections on that question. What does shared humanity mean to you? So we're also going to have a screen that's going to be shared, and we'll start seeing some reflections pop up on our screen. If you're not able to use the Mentimeter link, we ask you to share your reflections in our chat box. Our shared humanity refers to the universal human condition. We are born. We grow up dependent on relationships to people around us. And we are, as adults, capable of reflecting upon our own personal experiences within the universal human condition. Thank you. What does shared humanity mean to you? Empathy, love, resilience. Discover the other with the concerns and experiences and beliefs. Mutual connection. Saying a big yes in the chat box from Anders to ourselves and others for being who we truly are. Compassion and vulnerability. Respect and acceptance of any human being. Danielle has said shared humanity. We're capable, we are equally conscious animals and with choice of attitude, unlike anything else we've known in creation so far. Thank you for that. Mangalam says to include everybody. Thank you. Thank you. We are a human race. We are one human race. Respect everyone, acceptance, sharing resources, all not just physical, without discrimination of any kind. Seeing others as human first. Embrace differences, finding that meeting point. Can our meeting point be our differences? The culture of we. There's a wonderful book that I've got called From Me to We. This idea of just shifting the way we think. To be able to listen, acknowledge, and meet the emotional and mental needs of others, in addition to the physical needs. Thank you. Mutual dependence, unity and diversity from Anne-Marie. Thank you. Valerie says, appreciate diversity. We are all part of humanity. Thank you. Caroline says, from Australia, we are all valued and needed, and we all have a part to play. And that was something that came up in the breakout room that I was in, is this idea of how we feel valued and how we can value others, and finding those points, finding those meeting points and reflecting on that. Thank you very much. So feel free to continue to use the chat box to share your reflections. And we're now going to move on to the second part of our morning, evening, or afternoon, or wherever you may be across the world. And we're going to be meeting some guests today. So we've now got the opportunity to hear from those who have been part of the journey of the guide. From working with communities from around the theme of shared humanity to piloting the guide over the last year, we welcome Howard Grace, Isabella Stamley, Omnia Marzuk, and Anvita Bisaria. Welcome to all of you. So wonderful. So we welcome Howard Grace. Howard's worked in the voluntary capacity for the last 14 years, mostly overseas, with an organisation which is now called Initiatives of Change. This included 4 years in South Africa during the apartheid times. On returning to the UK, he trained as a teacher at the age of 40. Following that, he founded and led a programme conducting workshops in hundreds of sixth forms around the UK on issues related to purpose in life and motivation. Over to you, Howard.
Thank you very much, Elle. About 3 years ago, I was part of a workshop initiated by women in the early days from which this guide has emerged. It really resonated with the ways I'd been thinking, so I was honoured to be asked to contribute this morning. The introduction to me referred to conducting workshops in hundreds of UK school sixth forms. Over the years, this happened with a large variety of mostly younger, very international teammates. One older friend who made a particularly deep impact was Letlapa Mpatleli, who had been commander of a liberation army in the South African apartheid era. During the struggle, in retaliation, he had ordered massacres on white civilians. One of those killed was Lindy Fourie, a 23-year-old Cape Town University student. 9 years later, following a profound journey, Lindy's mother, Jin, forgave Letlapa. Letlapa shared his story in 36 sixth forms, senior high schools, in 6 weeks. And we also showed a film which gave Jin's side of the story. One thing we explored followed Letlapa saying, "When Jin forgave me, it touched something deep inside and restored my humanity." He is an atheist, yet he recognizes the transforming process that was triggered by being forgiven as a spiritual experience. The story of Letlapa and Jin is told in case study 3 in the new story guide. There has been a lot of endeavor in recent decades on the interfaith narrative. But when believers and non-believers get together, there tends to be more of a standoff. I believe that the next thrust forward in our human evolutionary journey would helpfully be much more of a focus on the human experiences which we can all identify with. Impulses like compassion are basic human instincts and come from an innate spirit in our human hearts, wherever we may believe that spirit originates. Those who work for the National Health Service and caring professions are also a really mixed bunch. What brings such an array of people together in common cause, especially during the COVID pandemic? Once again, I expect that most people are responding out of a basic human instinct, irrespective of their beliefs. My Palestinian friend, Imad Karam, who is the executive director of Initiatives of Change International, says that a primary problem in his part of the world is that Palestinians and Israelis are both trapped in their own narratives. I'm sure that this entrapment is true for so many situations, whether with international strife, religious affiliations, husband-wife clashes, gender issues, or even football team allegiances, which sometimes turn to crowd violence. As a way forward, Imad highlights the value of really living into each other's lives, of walking a mile in the other fellow's moccasins, as the saying goes. But further than that is the importance of seeking a shared vision which all, with our multitude of differences, can buy into. At a time when many are retreating into identity groups, and in many cases ceasing to talk to the other, how do we build trust with those on other sides of fault lines and make this a priority in our daily commitment? I believe that this new story guide of our shared humanity puts into our hands a means of enabling us to tap into a conversation which is also gathering momentum in the hearts of many. I thank those of you who have produced this guide. Thank you, Elle. I'll pass back to you.
Thank you very much, Howard, for sharing. I can see that you've got some applause. So we now move on to Isabella Stamley. She's passionate about creating societal transformations through socially focused approaches that work to connect people and communities. With an academic background in human geography and psychology, she's recently completed her master's in social development at the University of Sussex, where her research focused upon the identity politics of UK asylum seekers and detainees. She's also currently interning for Creators of Peace, and we welcome her to share a few words about her experience of working on the guide with Jean and Creators of Peace. Thank you very much, Isabella.
Thanks, Elle. Thank you, Howard. Hello, everyone. It's lovely to see you all here. I came to be involved with the new story guide over the past few months as part of my volunteer work with Creators of Peace UK. And I was lucky enough to be working alongside Jean Brown, helping to finalise the guide. And because I was in the UK at the time and Jean was in Australia, this meant a few early mornings for me and late nights for Jean, as we worked together on editing the content and formatting and restructuring the various sections of the guide. It was gratifying work to see the final version emerge from the comments and feedback made by the team and also by the participants of the pilot studies. And through this process, I gained a deeper understanding of the guide and its potential for empowering and transforming individuals and communities and groups. And to me, this guide is such a stimulating and powerful tool because it encourages our attention and our awareness, both inwards in our own lives and our own experiences, but also outwards to the world and to the society that we live in. And so the conversation prompts and the questions that are embedded throughout the guide encourage us to uncover the harmful and also helpful narratives that we as people or communities or even nations live out of and perpetuate, sometimes unknowingly. So as you work through the 5 conversations, you're building up this idea of how you personally are playing a role in these larger narratives and beginning to also formulate the different kinds of stories that are possible to create and embody together and within yourself and within your own life. And I think that this approach of realizing personal roles in the larger narrative is absolutely crucial and imperative to this process of reimagining a more inclusive and shared future. Thank you. I'll pass back to you.
Thank you very much for sharing, Isabella. It's been a pleasure to be working with you over the last year or so, and I know that you are greatly valued by the Creators of Peace team. So our next speaker is Omnia Marzuk. She was the first woman president of Initiatives of Change International from 2011 to 2016 and was introduced to Initiatives of Change while at school in Australia. For many years, she has been engaged in trust-building initiatives and intercultural and interfaith dialogue within the UK, as well as taking part in similar initiatives across Europe, the Middle East, Asia, and Africa. Thank you very much, Omnia, and I invite you to share a few words, please.
Thank you. So I had the great experience of being part of one of the pilot groups that were trying out the guide as it was being written, and then to host a group that was trying it out. As a participant, it was really interesting to see how the conversations enabled progression to a deeper level of understanding, both of yourself, but also of how wider narratives in society impact on us. But I was really interested in trying to see, could you really host this sort of conversation online to a group that really didn't know each other. So when I hosted a group, it was a group from 3 different continents. Nobody knew, there were only 2 people who knew each other. The rest of the group didn't know each other. It was a mixed group of different faith and non-faith backgrounds. It included a man as well as women. And the age range was a span of 40 years. So it was a very diverse group of people. And as host, actually, just to reassure you, so that I encourage you to be hosts, all you really have to do is hold the space and help the group stick to time. It's not a difficult thing to do. And I was struck by the fact that even though it was digital, very diverse, people who didn't know each other, that just following through the conversations enabled us to have very deep conversations, to also share deeply personal stories as part of that process. And it enabled us to gain a better understanding of how our narrative and the narratives in society impact on us, and how we can actually be individuals that can change that. So that's just from hosting it. At a personal level, I guess I'm somebody who, as a Muslim woman, I've been constantly sort of exposed to biases and perhaps negative narratives that other people might have about what I represent. But it was really interesting for me recently to unpack this question that you can be both the subject of negative biases and narratives, but at the same time, you can occupy positions of privilege. So my education, my work as a doctor, put me in a position of privilege, but at other times, you may be in a position where you're experiencing biases. So this realization that we all as individuals at different times and at different stages might occupy different sides of the coin of bias and privilege. And that was really a very interesting revelation for me. And I think the second thing, which I've appreciated more because I've been involved in dialogue for a long time, is that yes, you do have to change one-to-one people's stereotypes and pictures and narratives of your group, and you have to change your view of their group. But actually, we've become so polarized in the world today that we've got to do more than that together. We've really got to change the bigger narratives in society, not just one-to-one narratives. And we have to do that if we're really going to create societies in which everybody feels valued and in which everybody is able to flourish. So for me, this question of dialogue has taken an additional depth in really constantly asking myself, is what I'm doing enabling other people to flourish, whatever their background, whatever their perspectives, and how do I contribute to this change in the bigger narrative in society? Thank you, Al.
Thank you very much, Omnia. And this is an important part of this guide, is that the host, the host plays a role in bringing people together and really making sure that space is gently cared for. And from what I gather and what I know from hosting one myself, it was a pleasure to share that role with the people who attended. So it sort of goes around with whoever joins. So thank you very much, Omnia. We now move on to our final guest. Anvita Bisaria is an environmental and sustainability professional. She spent nearly a decade in the private sector supporting organizations to enhance their environment performance. She and her friend Shannon started an organization called Regenerative Roots. The aim of the organization is to help revive a sense of belonging rooted in the land, culture, and our own spirit. Anvita, I invite you to share a few words with us about your experience of being part of a conversation guide.
Thank you, Elle. Hello, everyone. I would first like to thank Creator of Peace for the opportunity to share my experience. It's an honor to be here tonight. I'm really fortunate to be a part of the pilot group of the story guide organized by Jean last year. And one very important thing I learned there is that we all are living out of our stories and narratives of our past. The narratives are sometimes inherited and sometimes we experience them. And for a new story of a shared humanity to be fully realized, we need to be aware of the specific stories, both nationally and personally, which we are living out of. So during my sessions, my personal experience of that was I became aware of my own narratives. And one of that was my bias towards my own people, the fellow Indians. I'm an Indian. I realized that for me, Western ways of being, knowing, and doing were more superior, and the traditional ways of existing were conservative, retrogressive, and anti-development. But then I thought, where did this narrative come from? And I realized that it is actually the colonization or the cultural imperialism. Colonizers, as you all know, we were ruled for like 2 decades. And in that period, there was an attempt in any colonized country to imprint their racial superiority on colonial subjects, which I felt that is the story which I was living out of. Unconsciously, I was not consciously aware of, but unconscious story. And that was a very, very, very big realization for me. After this, I decided to use this story guide for my own project, Regenerative Roots, which my friend Shannon and I have started. And the vision of this project was to reconnect the people from the land. So we decided to use the tools we learned at the story guide to understand why actually humans are so disconnected. What are their stories they are living out of? And to our surprise, not actually a surprise, but yeah, to our surprise, we found that one of the reasons is colonization. We felt that all of us are still living the story of colonization. Each one of us, I mean, every one of us, are uprooted from our land, our culture, our roots. And it's not just the colonized, but the colonizers as well. They were also disconnected from their land and their culture and their roots. And this uncertain identity and displaced belonging, it manifests with helplessness and anxiety, and it gives rise to the loneliness, the individualism which we have, this me society, the I culture, and the materialism, because we feel that void inside us. And we felt to create a new story which is imbued in we culture. It's important that we all identify, acknowledge our colonial past, heal the orphan which is within us, and then move toward a more participatory ways of knowing, being, and doing. Because we believe that in this world we are not separate, but everything is interconnected, alive, and energized by a common spirit. And I would like to end this by saying what a quote from which Barack Obama said, the worst thing that colonialism did was to cloud our view of our past. And it's a we culture, my pronunciation. Thank you. Thanks. Over to you, Elle.
Thank you very much, Anvita, for reminding us
Yes.
that we are together.
Yeah.
So thank you very much to Howard, Isabella, Omnia, and Anvita for sharing their experiences around shared humanity, their experiences on working with the guide and the community that put the guide together. Anvita, for your experiences of going through, and Omnia for sharing your insights as hosting the guide. Thank you very much. So we've been together now for an hour and 15 minutes, and we're coming to the end of our time together. Thank you very much to everybody who's been joining us from all across the world. I was in a room with somebody from the Philippines and the UK, so it was delightful to be having a conversation around shared humanity with somebody from the other side of the world. So again, I want to say just a few thank yous before I pass on to Jean to give us some concluding remarks from our session today. So I would like to say a thank you to our tech team, which is Miranda Shaw and Julie Welsh, and to Diana Damza, Diana Topan from Romania, for doing all the tech today. So thank you very much. To our guests, Anne Claire, Isabella Stanley, Howard, Grace, Omnia Marzuk, and Anvita. Thank you very much for taking the time out on your Saturday to come and share with us your experiences. So to conclude us for today, I'd like to pass on to Jean, who will tell us just a little bit more about the guide, give us some concluding remarks before we move to the end and we can share the guide with you. Thank you.
Yeah, so look, I think Elle is going to speak about a form and for everyone to is invited to fill out. So please fill it out. You know, this is a do-it-yourself program. Anyone can download the guide and just use it individually if you want to. But with a group of friends, I think you'll find the conversations can be very rich, as we've heard. If you wish for help with hosting or to be joined by a group of friends not yet met, a bit like Omnia's experience, do get in touch, and all feedback will be much appreciated. This is an evolving program. Thank you for being part of this launch today, and may I invite you all to engage in the honest conversations for change that will build this shared humanity. These conversations, we really hope, will bring new awareness and transformation. It's about walking our talk authentically as passionate, caring people, but it's also about talking our walk as we fearlessly advocate for it. You know, all of us can be creators of peace as we join in advocating for being the voices of this new urgent narrative for our age, a shared humanity. So thank you, Elle, thank you, fellow panelists, thank you, tech team, and thank you, audience, so much for listening and being part of this, and many blessings on your future advocacy. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Jean. So as we come to the end, we're going to put a link in the chat box, and you will see you can download the guide from this link that we're just putting in. It's free, so it can be used by anybody. So please visit that link and you can download a PDF. For those that would like to join a group, as Jean was saying, we're also sharing another link. It's a short form, and that form will allow you to kind of let us know if you would like to host or you'd like to join, and we'll be in touch with you about that as well. So thank you very much. So that's it from us. Thank you very much. We finished slightly early, but it's a thank you very much for everybody that joined us today. We're going to be staying on for another 15 minutes. So if anybody would like to stay on, you're welcome to talk to any of our guests and share sort of any questions that you have. Otherwise, we wish you a wonderful, wonderful rest of the morning, afternoon, and evening from wherever you are.